Hey folks, I'm Stacey from Air Rec Radio. I'm making a new show. You might have heard this before on Air Rec Radio, but if you haven't, surprise, I don't know how you found out about this to hear it if you didn't hear about it on Air Rec Radio. But whatever. Don't have a name for my show, but I do have a guest tonight. My guest tonight is, of course, my wife, Tami.
Hi, I'm the guest.
Hi, babe.
Hi.
It's good to see you in the studio tonight. You're looking ravishing as usual.
That's sweet.
So I don't know what I'm going to name this show, but I have a couple of titles in the works. I like something to talk about. I like things to say, and I like tell me about it.
I don't like tell me about it.
Really, that was the one whatever. I also just recently thought things to bulk about.
Bulk?
Bulk, like when
you buy things in bulk.
No.
Balk.
Like when you balk. Yeah, I guess.
Balk.
If you're a chicken, yeah, the noise you make when you're a chicken.
When I say I balked at that, it's I balked.
Yeah.
Not. Yes. Well, that's a
good
one.
It's B-A-L-K. It's bulk.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it most
that's
certainly
not how you
is.
spell it.
Go ahead and do a Google search.
Okay.
Make sure you do it in a new tab though, because we're going to need that news story.
I got this. My computer's very slow, so you have to wait 200 seconds.
It's not really very important anyway. The title is not super important at the moment. I just
That's true.
Trying to figure out.
What was the first one again? The first one you named?
Something to talk about, tell me about it, or something. Things to say.
I like things
something
to say.
to say. Maybe it was something to say.
I like.
Because everybody's got something to say. And I want to give everybody an opportunity. See, B-A-L-K.
You said B-U-L-K.
No, it's definitely not what I said.
Okay, then you're right. Yes.
I recorded this. We could listen to it and find out. But I'm pretty sure that I did not say B-U... B what?
B-U-L-K, which is bulk?
Definitely. No, that's bulk, like when you buy bags of pecans.
Yes.
Or pistachios.
Or toilet paper. You can buy that in bulk, too.
You can. Not in the bulk foods aisle, though. That's different.
That's true.
So, for the first episode of this tonight, I wanted to talk about minimum wage. I've heard, and I know you've heard, a whole lot of talk about minimum wage, and there's a lot of pressure right now to see it increased, and I haven't really had an opportunity to talk about it on Air Rec Radio.
We haven't really talked about it in depth either.
No, we haven't, no. But I heard a news story tonight that's going to help us get a little educated about minimum wage increase. This story is from the Stitcher news feed. This is the PBS NewsHour podcast. They do a terrific job of having daily news ready on the Stitcher news feed. I'm sorry, not on the Stitcher news feed, on the Stitcher. You just go to Stitcher.com. That's how you find Air Rec Radio. That's how you find ROC Podcasts. It's the best way to find podcasts if you don't have an iPod.
It works really well with your phone, too.
If you do have an iPod, then you should probably just use iTunes and look for the PBS NewsHour, and that's a great place to find news. I found this story. The headline is, how much does it really cost to live in a city like Seattle? But it turns out this story is mostly about minimum wage increase.
In general.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
In Seattle specifically.
Okay.
But I think it paints it's an easy to generalize picture of what people are talking about minimum wage. You want to play it?
Let's go.
No pay, no wage.
In Seattle this spring, rallies to raise the minimum wage. But not to the $10.10 being debated nationally. Here, they're talking about $15 an hour, citywide, 62% higher than this year's inflation-indexed state minimum wage of $9.32, already highest in the nation. Philip Locker helped run Shama Sawant's surprise election to the Seattle City Council last fall on a $15 minimum wage platform. The mayor and 7 of the other 8 council members now support the proposal of their unapologetically socialist colleague, a Mumbai-born economist who donates 2/3 of her $120,000 a year salary to what she calls social justice causes.
A real class struggle like the Fight for 15 in Seattle will energize and empower workers, raise their confidence and morale.
Socialism, after the fall of the Soviet Union, China becoming a purely capitalist country, Cuba not having succeeded, socialism, really?
The only reason you're talking to me is because an out-and-out socialist got elected in a major city in the United States with nearly 95,000 votes. It's time for working people to lose the shackles of fear and march ahead.
No burger, no fries.
But why exactly 15? Well, that's what University of Washington researchers have found is the self-sufficiency wage in Seattle for an adult with one child. The bare minimum, that is, for survival without public or private help. Union leader David Rolfe co-chairs the mayor's minimum wage committee.
There is a lot of anger in our community about what's happened to wages in not just recently, but over 40 years in America, that we've seen essentially economic growth since the late 1970s that has been unaccompanied by any wage growth for the bottom 90% of income earners.
That's in stark contrast to the wage growth all Americans saw from the 1940s through the 1970s. If paychecks had kept pace with economic growth, says researcher Lori Finkst,
the minimum wage today would be anywhere from $15 to $22 an hour, depending upon how you measure it.
more than many college grads make now.
Business is outraged that workers are demanding 15.
Well, this being progressive Seattle, we found little outrage among business owners, but at a city council hearing, plenty of concern.
We will have to reduce our hours.
There will be 20 to 30% fewer entry-level jobs.
Many people that own their businesses are going to have to shut down.
Yes, I'm for paying people more.
Even some of the workers were skeptics.
But if it's going to cost me my job, oh, hell no.
Again, researcher Lori Finkst.
Overwhelmingly, of the hundreds of studies that have been done, and they have been done on real-world examples from around the country, there's no impact on employment when you modestly increase the minimum wage.
But this is a significant increase.
That's right. What we don't know from the literature, because this hasn't been tried before, is what happens when you do that.
But we do know, as Econ 101 teaches, that if the cost of labor rises, and therefore so do prices, some customers will bolt, especially when the competition is in low-wage climes like Mexico or China, says Julie Hyatt, who owns Global Fulfillment, a company that assembles printed material, much of it by hand.
We lose work now because we're already not the cheapest. Being in Seattle makes us more expensive just to start.
I'm in the manufacturing business. I understand that. The sort of visceral fear that some of them feel about this change.
Seattle multimillionaire investor and entrepreneur Nick Hanauer is a leader of the $15 wage movement, but he still helps run his family's pillow business.
And indeed, we have factories where we do not pay workers $15. If my competitors pay 10 and we pay 15, we will surely go out of business. A great challenge we face in this city of raising the minimum wage to $15 is precisely that dynamic.
But look, says Hanauer, every economic decision involves trade-offs, boils down to weighing the costs against the benefits. And in this case,
the benefits overwhelm the costs. When worker compensation goes up, everyone benefits, right? Because those workers both buy more stuff and need less services from taxpayers.
Or, as Seattle writer David Goldstein puts it,
some people are winners and some people are losers. What you want is a policy that raises as many people up as possible.
But what about the losers, asks Julie Hyatt.
Those people now that are making minimum wage, they may have a criminal background, they may not have a GED. Where are they going to go?
Worst case, they wind up even more dependent on government services or nonprofits like the Downtown Emergency Services Center, a third of whose 520 employees make near the current minimum wage. A $15 minimum wage would cost the center well over $1 million, says Director Bill Hobson.
Which in an organization such as this one would invariably be translated into reductions in service. There will be more disabled homeless people on the street, cycling in and out of jails, out of hospital emergency departments.
And yet, in the end, Hobson supports $15 an hour because the benefits outweigh the costs, he thinks.
Big business, all industries, with no exceptions, will pay $15 an hour on January 1st, 2015 to all its workers.
Well, not so fast. Even socialist Sawant now seems willing to offer small businesses and nonprofits a 3-year phase-in. So will the $15 minimum wage happen here?
That's not a number you can back down from anymore. Whether it survives at the ballot after the business community spends a few $1 million to try to defeat it, that's another question.
We will keep you posted.
So that's from PBS NewsHour. You can find their podcast on iTunes, and you can find it on Stitcher. $15 an hour.
What's the minimum wage there? They said 9 something.
The minimum wage they said now is $9.10 an hour
Which is high.
which is a pretty high minimum. I think they said it's higher than the national. It's the highest in the nation.
Yes.
$9.10 an hour.
Yes.
Seattle is an expensive place to live. I wonder how much that minimum wage has to do with that. What are your thoughts on minimum wage? Just a quick synapse, I guess.
Well, from somebody that's been there, I've made minimum wage, and I was not a high school student doing that. I made more than minimum wage in high school, and then when I left high school, I made minimum wage, and I got through. I don't think I used any public services ever when I was making minimum wage. I had one child, and that was the only income.
Okay.
So, did I live in a great apartment? No. Did I always have gas for my car? No. But we had food, and I was relatively happy about, continuing to work at minimum wage and then making more as I worked into it.
To give people a little bit of background, you were making minimum wage how many years ago?
7.
7?
8.
8 years ago.
8 years ago.
8 years ago, you were making minimum wage. What do you do now?
I'm working on being an electrical engineer. I'm an electrical designer.
You're an electrical designer now.
Yes.
That's not a minimum wage job, right?
Absolutely not.
I didn't think so. So you wanted to do better, and circumstances lined up that you could do better.
Yes, I worked really hard at minimum wage jobs, which the temp agency then put me on higher paying jobs because I worked so hard.
Now, I want to be clear because it seems like I'm steering you into something, and I am, but I want to be very clear that I'm not saying that there are people out there who work very hard and do not get the lucky breaks. And that sure is true. So don't take it the wrong way. I just wanted to give people an idea of like...
Yeah, there's a lot of hardworking people making minimum wage.
Yeah. The trouble with minimum wage to me is that we think about it like it should be the minimum wage for everybody.
And that's not true.
That's not true.
No.
Like, all right, the current minimum wage in New York State is $7.25 per hour. It will rise to $8 per hour effective December 31st, 2013. Oh, so it's currently $8 It's currently $8 an hour. At the end of this year, it will rise to $8.75 an hour and $9 per hour effective December 31st, 2015 in New York State.
See, I think 9's really good for minimum wage here.
I think 9 is an appropriate minimum wage.
Yes.
But then I think, when you hear in that news story, they're talking about a single person with a single child. Now, $9 an hour is not really enough in most places that's going to,
That's
you're not
true.
going to do it on $9 an hour by yourself with your kid. You just, I
don't see that as what minimum wage should be, though.
I don't see, here's the thing, but there needs to be a minimum wage for that person because let's be real. There's a lot of that person out there.
With one child?
Yeah, there's a lot of single moms out there.
That's true.
And they work, and there's a lot of single dads out there, and they work.
Yep.
And there's a lot of people out there with responsibilities that there's just not the job market for. It's not like you can go and work at the factory.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I had a thought about what to do about this disparity because certainly for a high school kid with no bills and responsibilities or anything like that, he just needs the gas in his car and the screw around money.
Maybe there should be 2 minimum wages, 2 different ones.
I'm glad you said that. The problem with having 2 minimum wages is you would then have a market that undercuts itself.
Yeah.
Why would I hire single moms
when you can hire
I can hire teenagers for say $3 cheaper? So,
right.
a single mom gets $12 an hour minimum wage, just for example.
Right.
While a teenager with
gets $9.
No bills, no kids, no nothing like that gets $9 an hour. You would hire a bunch of teenagers with no bills or bullshit. Your employees would be... That's one free employee every 5 employees.
Right. So that makes sense then that's not a good idea, and the minimum wage should be one minimum wage.
So in Israel, the Israeli Jews do not like the Palestinians one little bit. And the Palestinians are like, we were here first, but after World War II, the Israeli Jews were given as recompense for the Holocaust a spot of land in the chosen land there.
Yeah.
And that's been a problem ever since. And a part of the problem has grown to be racism, probably both ways, but for the example, suffered by the Palestinians at the hands of the Israeli Jews. So if you have a job in Israel, there's a minimum wage there too. And some of your wage gets taken and put into a trust fund, kind of like Social Security in the United States.
For each individual or as a big pool?
I don't know. You know what? That's a good question that I don't know the answer to. It's not really super relevant. It's either for the society or it's for the individuals. But if you're Palestinian, it's not for you.
Right.
They take it out of your paycheck, but you can't use it.
It's for the Israelis?
See, the Israelis run the shop in Israel. They run shit.
Yeah.
And they don't like the Palestinians for whatever reason. So they don't want to pay the Palestinians as much. So how they got around that was they built this Social Security setup or whatever it is where some portion of your money comes out of your paycheck and goes into this private thing, this public thing. Only the Palestinians' money gets taken and they're not eligible for the benefit.
Oh.
Yeah.
Lame.
So that's a dirty, dirty thing that goes on there. And Israel just... I'm not going there, but Israel is the U.S.'s #1 client state.
Right. Okay. So
every time the U.S. votes alone, Israel votes with the U.S. They do it dirty, but they have this thing set up where based on who you are, your money, they have a minimum wage and they want to pay a certain part of the population less. But they don't want that part of the population to be chosen for jobs.
Because they're cheaper.
Because they're cheaper. So to the employer, a Palestinian or an Israeli employee both cost the same.
That's a good idea. They should do that to teenagers.
They should do that to teenagers. But I was like, how do you sell this to teenagers? And then I realized it doesn't matter. They can't vote. We can just take their money. So fuck them. No. That's not really what I realized. You have to come up with what are we going to do with the money that we take out of the teenager's paycheck? I thought Social Security could use a boost, but I don't know. I mean, because we are talking about like $3 an hour here, so it adds up.
Oh, well, you put it back into the government agencies. I'm sorry, pretty much the state-run agencies that support the poor. The assistance programs, you put it into that because then you're also helping the lower class that can't find a job because businesses can't hire as many people because the minimum wage went up. Because you're going to have more unemployed people because there's going to be less jobs if the minimum wage goes up that much.
See, now, I think that's a scare tactic a little bit. Like, it's not all a scare tactic. Don't get me wrong. That in that story, they even said, if my competitors pay 10 and we pay 15, then we're not going to be in business.
Right.
I think some of that's a scare tactic. But I definitely think that there's some truth in that, too. Like, because I know that money is finite, especially for smaller business owners. I'm not Coke, not Nike.
Right. And if every small business owner has to pay each employee $15, if they are going to stay in business, it's going to be with less employees, which is going to leave people unemployed. So that surplus could go into that.
I think that...
So people would get paid more and pay less taxes would be the ideal situation with that.
The trouble with minimum wage like this is that it's just flat thing. I know I'm taking a step back there, but like you just can't raise the bottom unilaterally and not realize that all you're doing is crushing the middle. Because the top isn't going anywhere but up.
Right.
and you're going to raise the bottom. The top's not just going to eat that dick. You know, it's either things are going to cost more, people are going to lose their jobs.
Yep.
One, the other, or both.
Probably both.
Probably both. I liked in that story the somebody, I don't know, it wasn't the anchor and it wasn't Shama Salan, the Mumbai-born economist that was economist, not economist.
Yes.
That was elected mayor. Some commenter was like, socialism after Russia fails, after China converts to capitalism, after Cuba.
What are they
Dude,
saying? Socialist. What are they saying is socialist?
Those were socialist countries.
I know, but what was the speaker talking about?
Oh, this is raising minimum wage is definitely a socialist thing to do.
Well,
That's what he was talking about. And this Shama Salan is a socialist. She's an out in the open socialist. About Cuba. Cuba isn't doing well economically, not because Cuba doesn't have a good economic system, but because they are under a U.S. embargo. You can't trade with Cuba.
Right.
They don't need to be a third world country. We make them one. So Cuba's a bad example, and Russia's a bad example because look at them. I mean, sure, did the USSR fall? Yeah.
I mean, is it really socialist, though, if it's only Seattle that's doing this right now? That's a huge jump.
No, the woman is a socialist.
Okay. Are we talking about
And-
Seattle still?
Well, you just were talking about the woman.
Right.
Shalom Salan, the new mayor of Seattle.
Right.
Is a socialist.
Okay.
Won the election with 95,000 votes.
Yes.
On a platform which included a $15 an hour minimum wage.
Right.
Which is a very socialist policy. So, on a $15 an hour minimum wage, if the entire country went to that,
The entire country.
yeah, let's say because minimum wage is it can't go down.
You're right.
What do you think about a $15 an hour minimum wage?
If it would be happening this year or next year, I think it would be too high. I think it would be way too high.
Oh my God, yeah, you would have to
Gradually getting there? I mean, it's going to gradually get there. I feel like they're trying to jump it too much right now.
The thing is in the current economic setting, we've had tremendous growth in individual wealth at the top for the past 20 years, and especially for the past decade. 9/11 happened, and the rich got rich.
Right.
And the poor either got poorer or didn't get any richer. And it's been like that for a decade now. So this argument, it's a tough argument to swallow about how the corporations can't afford to pay more. But you got to remember that the rich that are getting richer are like
really rich.
The really rich.
Well, now we're talking corporations.
We're talking Goldman's. Well, not Goldman Sachs.
If this
They're
was
done. But
corporations have to only pay this much, I would agree. But I feel like with
that might actually, you know what? That might actually encourage some of the giant conglomerate corporations to break down a little bit so that they were smaller, and we need them to separate a little bit.
They would even separate into different companies.
I don't mean ill will towards them. I just mean they're too big.
It's not working, right?
You've heard of the documentary Too Big to Fail. That's a saying because it means something. It's not they're too big.
Yep.
They're corporations have all the rights of citizens, and they suffer none of the consequences of committing crimes to the tune of literally robbing robbing the world. I mean, Jesus Christ, the 2008 collapse was completely because of crooked corporate practices in high finance. And nobody went to jail. Nobody went to jail. Nobody even lost money.
So we could brainstorm this point where what would happen if a business of certain size and up would have to pay a $15 minimum wage, but everybody else only got bumped up maybe to 10 or 9 even. We got to think about what would happen then. The corporations still have to hire people.
They would go out of the country more than they already have, I think is what you would see. But
well, there's regulations on that, though.
Not as much as you think.
Okay.
It's. I mean, there used to be regulations on stuff like that, but then Ronald Reagan's free market was like a free-for-all market, and Bill Clinton didn't do anything to make it any better. And
a lot of big corporations would still choose to be American-made because that's America employed, because they do get more backing that way too.
But what's American-made? Like, take for example a Ford pickup truck.
Mm-hmm.
This is an American car company, right? Well, thanks to the North American Free Trade Agreement, which basically made Canada into a state and Mexico into a state of third world labor.
Yeah.
And also most of the hemisphere,
Mhm.
actually, the entire hemisphere. So your Ford pickup truck is assembled in the United States.
But the parts aren't made here.
And some of it's made here.
Not most.
But the motor's made in Mexico and the transmission's made in Canada.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but the motor's made in Mexico by workers paid garbage. Absolutely. I mean, worse than garbage.
So you would think that if the corporations had to pay a higher minimum wage, that they would find more employment overseas.
Absolutely. Or not. They don't even have to go
So
overseas.
then we have to think,
you
is
don't
that
have to go
bad?
overseas. You just go to Mexico. It is bad because they don't pay them well. And what they want to do
Is be cheapest, and that's how they do that.
is make this state of perpetual mediocrity for everybody but the people at the top.
Right.
They just want to make everybody into little wage slaves. I mean, that's
Right.
that's what corporations do. They
Yes.
raise the people at the very top to obscene levels.
Yep.
And crush the middle or the bottom.
Yep.
Until it spreads and everybody else is the bottom.
Right.
That's bad. We need a minimum wage to protect against that. But we need a minimum wage that, like, corporations have to pay no matter where they are.
Right.
There you go. So, Nike, you would have to pay the American minimum wage if you wanted to sell your shoes in America. And if you don't want to sell your shoes in America, get the fuck out of here. We don't want your shoes. I had an idea the other day. I thought, wouldn't it be great to, like, open a shoe factory in the ghetto and call it Mercas?
Yeah.
You go and get a pair of Mercas for $250. Sure, they're a little more expensive, but everything about them is sourced in America. It's built with pride by American workers who have good benefits and good pay.
Right.
Mercas.
Mercas.
The shoe for Merkins. This is an idea I had. So, folks, if you're listening, feel free to steal that idea. You got anything else?
What do you think? What is your opinion on this? What do you think they should do?
Oh,
now that everybody's all riled up.
I liked your idea of having a more nuanced kind of minimum wage where a small business with this many employees
like a percentage
has to pay this, but then you end up some assholes got to be like, well, what if they only work 30 hours a week and now you've got like twice as many part-time employees,
right?
That
because the real problem is there's not enough jobs. I mean, I think
there is enough jobs. We're just doing them all wrong.
There's a lot of minimum wage jobs.
If we had cleaner farms, there'd be more farm employees.
Yeah.
And if there were more farm employees, you know what there'd be? Healthier people, because farming is healthy work.
Right.
It just is. And there'd be more healthier people because you'd be doing cleaner farming.
Right.
Human labor is good labor. We're made for it. We like to work. We just do. I mean, not everybody likes to work on a farm, and I'm not saying everybody should, but there's a job. If we would pay an honest price for food, we could afford to pay food pickers minimum wage. But instead, we externalize that cost and send it down the line. And basically what we're doing is we're mortgaging our children's futures against our lazy spending habits.
Yep.
And that's what makes it so that there's not enough jobs.
Yeah, we buy the cheapest for what we like, and
yeah,
and then we just move on. That's just what we do. We don't think about where it's coming from or how it's made or whose jobs are being affected by it or the economy or
nobody thinks about that. We're all just like, oh, I want the cheapest piece of bullshit thing I can get. And like, look at it this way, like even more than on the consumer level, because the consumer has some responsibility, but the manufacturer has some responsibility too. Mm-hmm. Let's look at the choices you're faced with as an American walking into a grocery store.
Yeah.
Go to the cereal aisle.
Yeah.
How many different kinds of Cheerios do we really need?
Yeah.
This is a choice we're given to trick us into thinking we have freedom. They give us this choice, and they allow us to do it freely. You want chocolate Cheerios? Oh, we got those. You want apple cinnamon Cheerios? Well, we got those. Honey nut? Yeah. Regular bland-ass Cheerios? Yep, got them. Multigrain?
Yeah.
What were those Hot Pockets we bought the other day? There was we bought
4 cheese and 5 cheese. Two different Hot Pockets.
The only difference was that one was 4 cheese and the other was 5 cheese. But that's a choice that we get.
Yeah.
Boy, we're free. We're free. They market it at you in the grocery store, and they start from a very young age.
Oh yeah.
Have you ever noticed that all of the mascots on children's food products are looking down?
No.
They are.
I've never noticed that.
Take a look at it next time you're in the store.
Because they're looking down at the bowl of Cheerios.
No.
No.
They're looking down at your children from a position of authority.
Oh.
This is psychology 101.
Oh.
See, when someone looks down on you, it projects a kind of authority. That's why we have this term, look down on, and treat it like you're giving somebody shame. That's not, cereal companies aren't trying to shame children into buying children, but marketers are certainly doing whatever they can to make children want their cereal.
Yeah.
And it programs adults because, you don't get to be an adult if you weren't a child first, and you got programmed without even knowing it by these friendly things, these apparent cartoon characters who are just looking down on you your whole childhood.
Yes. So what do you think would happen?
That doesn't really have anything to do with minimum wage.
I mean, it started there, though. That's
Yeah.
all that matters. It started there, and it was interesting, and that's all that matters. But what would you think? What would be your prediction if they did this by the end of the year and they said Seattle $15 an hour minimum wage? What do you think? Do you really think that a lot of companies would shut down?
I don't know enough about Seattle's economy. I suspect that Seattle's a pretty expensive place to live, and I know that expensive places to live are expensive because they have high costs of living.
Yeah.
And things are I guess that's backwards.
That's the same almost.
It is. High cost of living is part of being in Seattle. And if you're going to be in Seattle, then that means a higher wage, too. Places with higher costs of living also have higher medium incomes.
Right.
So that's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And again, all this would do is raise the bottom, which would feel great for the bottom people for a little while until, like...
all the prices would go up.
The Subway private owner was like, yeah, we can't have 3 people on at lunch anymore, so you don't have a job anymore.
Yep. Yep.
Because that's a big hit for small businesses to take.
Yep.
Especially without raising their price. And if they raise their price, well, then there goes the raise in minimum wage, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sure, you think you're spreading it out, and you are spreading it out. You're spreading it out amongst the middle people who didn't get a raise.
Oh, yeah. And how mad are they? They work so hard to get there.
Like, if minimum wage goes up, I'm not going to get a raise. Not really.
That's the thing. And I think, and that's a joke people tell when they hear the minimum wage went up by 50 cents. They're like, well, I'm not getting a raise.
Yeah.
But it's true. Like, it's true.
It should be. Everybody gets that increase.
Except for the rich people.
No, even the rich people. Listen, honestly, if you're making $4 million a year,
right,
what's another $3 an hour?
Right.
Honestly.
Well, that's the thing. What would that do? That would just make things cost more.
Well, that's what it would do anyway.
I don't know if that's true.
I do.
I mean, I know it would make things cost more, but I don't think as much as raising everybody's wage. No,
not as much.
So
that's true.
That's what I mean. There's a huge difference there, but there is.
I guess I was saying more from the
relationship.
top perspective.
Yes.
I make $4 million a year. What's honestly? What am I going to do with this?
What is it? Why don't they? Then they don't need it.
Yeah. Here's the other thing. If you make $4 million a year, you're hoarding resources.
Right.
That's what you're doing, and that's something that early hunter-gatherers were super duper and that's what we all came from is hunter-gatherers. You don't hoard resources amongst your fellow primate.
Right.
That's poor etiquette. It's okay to have enough. It's okay to have enough. It's okay to have a little bit on the side. There's a certain point, and I said 4 million, but I don't know if that's actually the point. There is a certain point where wealth becomes meaningless except as wealth.
And you're hurting the people.
And
below
you're
you.
hurting all the other people.
So here's an idea then.
But you're doing great.
Yes. Here's an idea stemming from the conversation we just had. Is if you're raising the minimum wage from 9-something to 15, I wonder what that percentage would be.
If you're raising I'm sorry.
In Seattle, if they're raising the minimum wage from 9 to 15, whatever percentage that is, if you took that percentage and applied it.
It's a 45% increase.
So if you
40% increase.
So if you're giving them a 45% increase, perhaps then the middle class would get a 20% increase, and the higher class would get a 10% increase. You could do How
about the higher class doesn't need? Here's the thing. How about the higher class doesn't need it?
So you think just the
minimum
lower
wage
and the middle?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I think you draw a line in the sand where you say, all right.
So I mean, that would still have a huge impact. Then
you're making $275,000 a year by yourself. You don't need a minimum wage increase. You're doing just fine. But if you're making $50,000 a year by yourself, and minimum wage goes up,
you should get a 20%.
Well, you should be going up a little bit too.
How about minimum wage gets 45, and if minimum wage gets 45, then maybe middle class gets 20. Just something like that would be fair, and it would help the economy, and it would raise up a lot more people than just the minimum wagers.
And it would help assuage some of the pain of having prices go up. Because
and
now
I bet
everybody down who's going to feel the pings of prices going up, because the richy rich, they don't realize when milk goes up.
No.
They don't notice it. The very tippy top of the middle class doesn't notice when the price of milk goes up. But the bottom of the middle class, the middle of the middle class, those people notice when the price of milk goes up.
Yep.
Because suddenly they just got one step further down the ladder.
Right.
So maybe that 20% or whatever percent that you would give to the middle class would help assuage some of the pain of the ensuing cost rises, because cost is going up. You just have to know it.
And small business owners are middle class. So, I mean, small business owners would be considered middle class. So this might work if you gave the minimum wagers 45% increase and gave the middle class 20%.
Well, except for how do you give an owner?
More businesses might stay open. How do you give an owner?
How do you give an owner a minimum wage increase? It's got to come out of somebody.
Right. Well, that's true too. Yes.
Here's why this is a debate. Because it's nuanced as fuck.
But if you give middle classers a raise, they would be able to start more businesses.
You don't ever... Yeah, well, that's true too. Losing, what they would be able to start more businesses, losing business to Walmart.
Right.
The thing about this debate is that it's the news gives you that story that we listen to, that's pretty much the story you're going to hear just about everywhere.
That's it, yeah.
I mean, that was the pro. They were definitely more pro in their approach to a minimum wage increase.
But they gave some cons.
But they did give some cons. I'm not saying they were completely biased or unbiased, but the conversation needs nuance. And it needs nuance at the level of the common people like you and me, so that we're not all just saying our simple, dumb idea. Minimum wage is good. Minimum wage is bad. That's not...
I'm not getting a raise. Shut up. Just what is your idea?
Think about what is your idea,
Right.
and spitball those ideas among your friends. Because when we spitball ideas among our friends, we change the social consciousness.
Yeah.
That's the point of this show. This has been the first episode of this show. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Tami, for coming on the show, especially since you live here, so that's cool. Nobody has to drive drunk. It's a miracle.
We're not drunk, but yes.
Well, also, we're not drunk, but
yes,
if we were, nobody would have to drive.
Yes.
So that's great.
Woo!
So thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
Peace.